Hi, so we're here with Phyllis today, and Phyllis is a author of a book, um, and she about violence and the nation, and I want her to share about how therapy and dealing with our own stuff can help us cope with all of it. So, Phyllis, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, shoot, whatever you want to, wherever you want to
Okay,
start.
start with the title and premise of your book, and then
Sure.
we'll move forward from there.
Great. So the title of my book is America in Therapy: A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. And I've been a psychotherapist for well over 30 years, and I've worked with families and children and adults, individuals, teenagers, couples, kind of the whole gamut, and very have a lot of experience in family therapy in particular, and the lens of family therapy that I think modern psychology uses today, no matter who you're treating. We look at what's going on in the family system to better understand what's going on with the individual. And at a certain point, it became really clear to me that family systems exist on a lot of levels, not just in our families of origin, but in any kind of grouping, whether it's in a workplace or a community setting or a school or a business, and in government. And that the same dynamics that happen between people in families, we just reenact them wherever we go. The roles we've played, the role models for how men and women are supposed to be, what are expectations, what are the rewards and consequences for different behaviors, all of that we just take with us from our early conditioning into the world around us, unless we've learned something different.
Right.
And what became really clear to me is that having worked so extensively with abuse and dysfunction, which is what people bring to therapy for the most part, and which is really rampant in our country today, it became really clear to me that some of the worst dynamics that happen in families are also happening on large levels, in large institutions, and from the top down in government. And some of the things that we're experiencing as citizens in a country are the same very deleterious things that people experience in homes that are dysfunctional. And because basically the country is made up of millions of individuals, and we just bring ourselves wherever we go. And people who are not healed of their own wounds bring their wounds and the way that they play out to the positions of power that they have over other human beings. And and of course, there are many people who do not do that. There are many people who are healthy and have good boundaries and have good, the best interests of others at heart. But there are other people who are wounded in their own ways, who carry those wounds into the way that they deal with large numbers of people in our country, with very, very difficult and deleterious effects. And I felt like I needed to write about that. Um,
Right. Um, what did you learn about you as you were writing the book?
oh, that's a great question. It really is, um, because it's really important to talk about the individual level as well as the collective level. Um, and so, it put a real spotlight on, am I living what I'm talking about? And it's always been that way for me as a therapist. Every client that I think has walked through my door, um, and I do, some kind of healing approach to, or we delve into their past and see how it's conditioned their present. And I've also done years of therapy myself. So, but yeah, and that is, I'm really glad you asked that question, because the bottom line is, and we're all imperfect at this. I'm not a highly developed, perfect human being. I think we're all in process, right?
Yes. Yes.
But part of the process is, am I practicing what I preach?
Mm.
And I think to a large extent that is not the case, and that we've accepted as a society that there can be this disparity between what we condone, what we vote for, what we legislate, and what we allow to be done to other people, that we would never want to have be done to ourselves or anyone we love and care about. And these are mental health issues. So yes, am I practicing what I preach in my own life with the people that I intersect with? And can I do that better?
So Did I hear you correctly say that you don't think that you are practicing what you preach?
Oh, no, no, I'm saying that's the question that is always there,
Right.
to
Mhm.
what, no, and there are moments when I don't practice what I preach, for sure, because I'm a human being.
Human, exactly.
But the point is not perfection. That isn't the point. I don't know anybody who always practices every single thing that they preach in every moment. I don't think that's what we are as human beings right now. We're developing, we're perfecting, but we're on a road to doing it better. And and part of that point that I think is really important is that we don't beat ourselves up if we didn't do it the way we really know we want to, or that we know is a better way to treat another human being or ourselves. The point is that we repair whatever damage we've done or the injury that we've done to ourselves, that we repair it and we keep going. Um, and that is what one of the many reasons why I wrote this book is because that's the whole point of psychotherapy and psychology, is that we repair injury. We don't say we can always prevent any other conflict from happening in the future, or that my feelings will never be hurt, or that I'll never hurt yours. It's not possible, I don't think, but we can repair.
Mhm.
And if goal is repair, if the goal is, if I hurt your feelings by something I said, and you tell me, and you're mad at me, or you're hurt by me, if I genuinely want to make amends to you, to hear what you have to say, to take in your pain at whatever I might have done, and be genuinely apologetic and do it differently in the future, then that is what psychotherapy actually offers, rather than, no, I'm right and you're wrong, and we're just going to keep battling it out until somebody wins,
Right.
which is a lot of what governs what's going on in the world today. I'm right, you're wrong, and if I'll kill you if I have to. So psychotherapy and psychology bring a completely different healing lens to human relations that we know about. This is not, I'm not even talking about anything that's rocket science. It's just that it's not applied to some of the highest levels of power and influence and legislation.
So how do we apply it? Like it's not like we can force all of our legislators to go into therapy, right? Like it's not like if I vote for you, you're going to go into therapy, right? Like if I vote for you, then you're going to be somebody who's willing to be introspective and thoughtful and willing to do the work of oneself, right? Like cuz we all have work to do,
Right. We all
right?
have work to do. We all have work to do, and we always will.
Yes.
It's, there's a very well-known couples therapist named Terry Real, and he says over and over again, relationship is a process of rupture and repair. We're always going to have the ruptures, but we don't always commit to repair, and we can commit to repair. That is something that is in our power to do.
Right.
So yes, we can't I wouldn't legislate that every, person in a position of power has to be in therapy. I could hope for that, that people would see that they have their own wounds that are influencing the way they behave. But
Yes.
short of that, what we can do is apply some of the principles of deep listening to how government operates, to how large businesses operate, to how large institutions operate. And a very simple one, and I say this over and over again, would be, and of course, this has to come from the populace. This is what we want. This is what we want to see, right? This is what we're voting for. So one idea would be that we actually have it be part of Congress, for instance, that we have trained facilitators mediating conversation between opposing parties, between opposing points of view, teaching people in positions of great power and control and influence how to actually listen to an opposing point of view without acting out. Like in our therapy offices, we don't let people just act out and scream at each other. We teach them, we help them, and I don't mean teach them like I'm above you, but we help people restrain their most violent reactive impulses and actually listen the way they want to be heard, because we all want to be heard. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be heard, but we haven't been taught how to listen the way we want to be heard. I think many of us have been taught that we should try to win the argument.
Yes.
And right. And that's fine if you're arguing over how to cook the chicken, you know, right? But it's not fine if you're arguing over spending billions of dollars on nuclear weapons, or what country to invade, or what populace to target as less than and incarcerate. It's not okay. We need to have all the voices at the table and listen with respect, because this is what we really want in our own lives. And why are we not asking that of the people who have so much power over our lives? There are basic principles that anyone, not just me, psychotherapists, family counselors, mediators, and other people in helping professions use to help people come together and repair what's broken in their relationships. And we need to have that commitment in the highest levels of influence. I don't even think that commitment is there yet.
Mm-mm. No, a struggle that I have is like that in my eyes, in my, you know, the way that I look at the world and the way that I've experienced life as a female, especially in our nation.
Yep.
I firmly believe there are two Supreme Court justices who are sexual deviant slash offenders sitting on the Supreme Court right now. And
Yep.
as a female, right, who's living in this nation, it's something that actually causes me much distress.
Yes. And it causes many people much distress. And so often we end up feeling powerless to do
I feel
anything about
powerless.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Powerlessness creates many different symptoms. It can create just a feeling of complete resignation. I can't do anything, so I won't.
Right.
That's not what we need in our country today. Okay? It also produces rage. It can produce massive rage. And rage is okay at injustice if we know how to channel it into something constructive.
Right.
The third option: take the feeling of powerlessness, take the feeling of rage, take the feelings of injustice, and channel them into something constructive, which is I talk about a lot of this in detail in my book, and it's hard to condense it into a quick
Of
conversation.
course. Yeah. No, I get that.
But one of the ways to do that is to understand that even with people like that we feel have committed crimes, who still hold positions of power, that the goal is to have there be accountability without violence. That's what that's one of the goals of the best psychotherapy. We hurt each other. People do terrible things. Sometimes people do really need to be incarcerated because they're a danger to society,
Right.
but they didn't get that way by accident. Something happened to them that disconnected them from their own humanity, from good boundaries, from care and concern, from their own sense of well-being. Something happened to them, and we have to know that. So we might have to separate them, and maybe in the best of all, or not maybe, but in the best of all possible worlds, people who have committed crimes do not get to hold positions of power over other people. Well, I'm saying too many things at once. I guess what I'm saying is, let me break it apart into two things. One is, yes, we have to deal with the powerlessness and the rage that so many people in America feel today, and help people find a constructive way to channel those feelings into making constructive changes. How do we remove people from office without just making it the Colosseum, where we crucify people for the next cause? Does that make sense? How do
Yeah.
we do that?
But in a situation like a Supreme Court justice, once they're there, they're there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that one of them that I have in mind is currently having some other issues besides the sexual deviant issue, right? Like there's another issue. And I again feel powerlessness about
Mhm.
his social interactions and his ability to be unbiased as a judge.
That's absolutely. And again, this is what people experience in abusive households. It's
Mhm.
exactly what they experience, that there's someone in power and in control in their home that can hurt them and get away with it.
Mhm.
That can make decisions that are not in everyone's best interest, and no one is there to stop them. And that is why I'm making such a case of taking what we know about dysfunctional family dynamics and applying them as a lens through which to see what's going on in our country. Because the more people are informed about what's actually happening, the less powerless they're going to feel,
Mm.
right?
Right.
Look,
But then there are a lot of people who feel like that's over there. That doesn't affect me. That's not my daily. That's not. And then they, pardon the expression, but they just ostrich up and put
mhm,
their head in the sand, leave their butts hanging out
yeah.
because they just don't, it feels overwhelming to do anything about it.
I agree. I mean, I agree. I think that is part of the danger of what's happening. And so, and I talk about what happens in a family where there's abuse and there's no intervention. And for some people, like you're saying, the only way that they know how to cope is to deny. The
Mm.
only way they know how to survive sometimes is to put their head in the sand or pretend they don't see or try not to see and don't say anything. Because as long as an abusive person or power is in control, it's dangerous to speak truth. It's dangerous to resist.
Right.
Um, People sometimes get killed. Look at what has happened to so many of the peaceful protesters in our country being tear gassed and hit with rubber bullets. And I read this thing which I didn't even know about, called kettling, where peaceful protesters were walled in from both sides by armed law enforcement where they couldn't escape, and then assaulted and
Mm.
jailed. And this is what abusers do when people protest what they're doing, and it's not okay.
No.
And we have to rise up. We have to know these are abuse policies. This is not an ideological issue. It's not because I disagree with what you're saying that I'm kettling you or hitting you with a rubber bullet or tear gassing you. I am doing that because I am mentally unwell.
Mm.
Mentally unwell people assault others. There's no ideological difference that justifies harming another person's body. And I'm not talking about if you're really in a position where you have to defend yourself to stay alive.
Right, right,
That's not what we're talking about.
right. No.
It's a big deal. I mean, that's
So,
why I wrote this book, because this is alarming what's happening in our country.
so where's the hope?
Yeah, and perfect, because half of my book is sort of like the diagnosis, and half of my book is where is the hope. And the hope is that we, from many directions, like for instance the example I gave you, the hope is that we say our congressmen and women have to work it out. They cannot walk out on each other. They cannot filibuster for hours. They have to work it out because the people of America need them to work it out, just like the children in a family need their parents to work it out. Children don't do well in a family where their parents are fighting all the time and never agree, and they become very symptomatic. And that's what's happening in our country, is that we have leaders that are totally invested in just keeping the argument and the silencing of each other and the putting of each other down and the verbal assault going. And that's a role model for our country and for our children. So part of talking about it and diagnosing it is saying, we need to ask our leaders to do something different. We need them to learn nonviolent conflict resolution skills. We need them to be held accountable for enacting nonviolent conflict resolution skills in all branches of government so that the people can actually get some of their needs met.
Right.
Right? So that's one thing. But I also think that just educating people is a beginning. I don't think many people actually know what the dynamics of an abused family are. Or, for instance, here's a very powerful one that you can see playing out in the country all the time, that abusers will blame their victims for the abuse. I hit you because you said that, because you wore that short skirt, because you failed your test in school, because blah, blah. You didn't like the look on your face. We do the same thing. We target certain populations and we say we're justified in withholding resources from them because they're lazy, because they're entitled, because they have a different color skin, because they're women, because whatever. We
Because they
still,
question my authority.
yeah, we still have not passed the Equal Rights Amendment.
No.
I mean, that's appalling for the United States. That's appalling for every woman in this country. But anyway, to go back to the hope, I really believe that part of the hope is educating people, because when people are educated, then they advocate for things that are healthy for themselves and other human beings. I
Right.
have never worked with anyone, and I've said this many, many times, I have never worked with anyone who has really done the deep dive into what isn't working in their life and the early conditioning that set them up to make bad choices, or be sort of have failure to thrive, or not be able to express themselves creatively, or make a good relationship, or get along with their children. I have never met anyone who has done the deep work who has uncovered a monster.
Hmm.
Ever. What we uncover is a loving, caring, connected human being. And so, so while I wouldn't pass a law that every legislator has to be in therapy, what if we said we want people who are committed to their mental health, their own mental health, to be in office?
Right.
What if we worked on that ourselves? I can always, like going back to the beginning of our conversation, I can always be a better, more loving human being. I have my triggers. I have my little reaction patterns. I have deep wounds from my childhood, like most people I know, that can get activated by my husband, right?
Right.
Um, and but we have created a container in our relationship in which we're committed to working it out. I trigger him, he triggers me some of the time. But we always come back to reconnection and love, no matter what it takes. And that's what we need in our country. And it's possible. It's not Pollyanna thinking. It's possible if we want it.
One of the things that in your talking, that you helped me think of is the bravery that John Fetterman showed by openly saying that he was struggling with depression.
Depression,
and then,
right?
and then stepping in and putting himself into a position where he was out of right. He put himself out of commission and went inpatient so that he could deal with his depression, so that he could be a better leader for his people. Um,
Absolutely.
and he took shit for that, right? There were people who definitely gave him shit for that. But I will say there are also a lot of people, myself included, who like love the example that shows, and the
That's right.
willingness that he shows to say, hey, I'm not in a space I need to be. I'm going to get myself in a space I need to be so that I can be a better leader for the rest of you.
Yeah. I really love that you brought up that example, because those are the role models we need instead of these tough guy role models. I'm invincible. I don't have to listen to anybody. I know best. Um, these are all symptoms of mental unwellness, when people are so centered on their own way of being and their own view of the world that there's no room for anyone else.
Right.
And another really good point that you brought up by giving that example is that we still, even though, and I'm so glad that he did what he did. I'm so glad that there are movie stars who come out and say, I'm going into treatment for drug addiction. I have bipolar disorder. I was, assaulted as a child, and I'm working on my trauma issues. And we do have more and more role models like that, and that's fantastic. But we still also have a lot of stigma around getting help for mental health issues. And what's beautiful about the example that you gave is that it really does take courage to acknowledge that. And it takes a lot of courage and hard work to do the work. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of being, deficient or inferior at all. It actually takes great strength and courage.
I'm quickly looking up. I recently read a book. I don't know if you know, and it's okay if you don't. There's a woman named Lucy Score who is an author, and she's written a book series. And um, one of the books in the third book in the series is called Things We Left Behind. And this, yeah, it's actually the main character in it. One of the main characters is from an abusive home.
Mm.
And when you see him, quote, doing the work, right? The work is actually a conversation. The work is not like when I think of work, right? And I think of hard work, I think of being out in a field where you're sweaty and you like, you're helping your parents plant all day, right? You put a tree in the backyard, like you come in and you are dirty and you're stinky and you're miserable because you've been straining all day and you've been pulling around buckets of mulch all day, right? Like, or you're putting in pavers, so they're really heavy, right? Like, or there's actually people who are doing the farming work, right? That's what I think of when people say do the work. But for mental health, and I think this book, the Things We Left Behind, she always has funky titles, and Things We Left Behind by Lucy Score, she shows the work is this is making me mad. This is why it makes me mad. This is the belief I've come up about that. This is where my belief might be wrong about that. What's
Totally.
your perspective on this? How do I take that perspective in? That's the work, right? The
Yeah.
work is not, the work is not, and like at one point there's a therapist who's a friend who's like all manner of like whatever. I can't, but he breaks all the dual relationships. But like there's the therapist who's a friend basically says you've done a lot of really hard work today, right? And points out that this conversation you have where you just sort of say this is what hurt me and this is what hurt you and this is where we're not combined is quote hard work. And so for some people who are used to coming home with dirty hands, right? And that being hard work, a conversation doesn't seem like it would be quote hard work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting use of words because it's, a lot of hard work actually yields something wonderful, right? We wouldn't do it unless there was some great thing that we hope to gain from it in the end. And obviously not everybody's hard work is like that, but the hard work of therapy is like that. There's a real goal for healing a relationship or healing a trauma within yourself. And the hard work is sometimes being accountable for your own behavior, because that is really hard for human beings. It's much easier for us to talk about how somebody hurt us. It's harder to sit and listen to how I might have hurt somebody else and be accountable for that and take responsibility for that and not blame them for what I did, which is a dysfunctional dynamic. Well, I only yelled at you because you blah, blah, blah. That this is what we're trying to get away from. So it is hard work to be accountable for ourselves. But let me just put a different picture around it, because it's also really beautiful work.
Yeah.
The things that we've suffered and the wounds that we carry were created by dysfunctional relationships with other human beings. That's what happened. Somebody didn't love us well, or they hurt us when we were growing up, or they ignored us, or they didn't validate us, or they discriminated against us, or they violated our body. The main hurts that we suffer and the main wounds we carry come from what happened to us with other people that wasn't great. And in a therapy setting and in a healing modality of some kind, we are actually experiencing a way to talk about our pain and reprocess our pain in the ways that you just mentioned with a safe human being. And
Mhm.
that in itself is reparative. So we have to become safe human beings for each other. We're not all going to become therapists, and that wouldn't even be the goal. And not everybody's ever going to go to therapy, but we can become safe human beings for each other. We can listen to each other's pain. We can be empathic. We can have good boundaries ourselves. We can be accountable for our own behavior. We can role model that, and we can ask that of people in power.
Yes, I agree.
So you bring up great issues in it, really.
Well, I thank you for being such a willing participant.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So again, the title of your book is, I should have written it down.
It's America in Therapy. And then there's a
America
subtitle.
in Therapy.
I
Yep.
think people will remember American Therapy. It's coming out next year. And
Phyllis
and
Leavitt, right? Leavitt.
right. And please look for me on my website and in social media. And I would love it if people went on my website and signed in for my newsletter, because then I can let you know when the book is available and keep you updated and whatever else is happening between now and then. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Great. Great.
Hold on.